Hello there, everyone, and welcome back again to Live with Lindsay. I'm really excited to see you back again this week. And this week, we'll be talking with Corry Robertson about using coaching as a leadership style, which I think is such an important topic. I think it brings so much growth to teams and organizations. As I'll bring Corry in just a moment. For anyone watching, I'd love to hear, as usual, where you're watching from, and feel free to share any questions you have for Corry as we're going along. I just wanted to share too, as many of you know, I've recently launched the Workplace Communication podcast, which can be found at lindsaylapaquette.com/podcast. And on the podcast, I interview all sorts of different experts on a wide variety of topics related to workplace communication, leadership development, personal development, self-awareness, and all sorts of great topics that will make you grow as a leader. So you can check those episodes out. And if you've enjoyed it, I would love it if you would leave me a rating or review on Stitcher, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you're watching. And so with that, I will bring Corry in. So Corry, hi.
Hello, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Oh, great. Great.
So, like I said, Corry is here to talk to us about using coaching as a leadership approach. And Corry, I'd like it if you could just start off by giving people a little bit of information about your background and your company and what you do.
Yeah, so I am a professional certified coach, which is for short PCC, for those of you who are following the coaching world. So that means I have extensive training and experience as a coach, and I've transformed that into not just an executive coaching practice, but also a coaching academy, because I am now teaching leaders how to use coaching as a leadership style.
I love it. So we're going to get into that and all the details of how to do that. There's, I think, a lot of leaders who are interested in trying to develop these skills. Like I said before, for whoever's watching, I'd love to hear where you're from. David's here once again from Bellevue, Washington, and I appreciate you joining us faithfully each and every week. So thanks for watching. And like I said, for everyone else, let us know where you're watching from and share your questions in the chat. So Corry, first of all, let's maybe start by talking about what coaching is and maybe what coaching is not, what people think coaching is, but it actually isn't.
Yeah, so I think I'll start with that, with the second part of the question. So what coaching is not, because sometimes it's easier to narrow it down from that perspective. So coaching, first of all, is not consulting. It's a big misconception. So a lot of people will come into, or go looking for a coach because they're looking for knowledge and information and tips and tricks on how to do things better or how to know things that they need to know. So that's not coaching. So instead, what coaches do is we work with the knowledge and the experience and the creativity that our clients already have. So, you can get all the knowledge you need on Google. You've already been through your training courses, your degrees, your certifications. You already have so much experience in the world with life that you have enough, and coaches believe that, and we know that. So what we do is it's a strategic thinking process. It's a creative thinking process. It's a conversation where we know how to peel the onion back and really get to the core, that engine, that spark of where your genius is and where your potential is, and then transform that into the performance that you're looking for. So it's not therapy, although some people say, oh, wow, that feels so great to be able to talk, like this, but it's so, it could feel therapeutic because it makes you feel better, but it's not therapy. It's not spiritual counseling. It's not teaching. It's not consulting. It's not advising. It's not mentoring. It's really a very unique and specific skill set.
Mm-hmm. So I, to be honest, years back, did not at all understand the difference between a coach and a consultant. And when I would be hiring for help in my own life and business, sometimes did not hire the right professionals because what I was seeking out didn't match their role. And I did not understand the distinction between the two at the time. I just want to say hi real quick to David. David, if you're still on, lovely to see you. I don't know if you know Corry. David's a fellow CAPS member, so nice to see you, David. Yeah, thanks for joining us. So what is it that brings people to you? How do people know that they need a coach?
Well, I think the coaching industry has done a great job at clarifying what coaching is and what it isn't. And more professionals, so I'm an executive coach. I work with executives, and I also help managers develop their own coaching skills. So people more and more are finding me through LinkedIn and through Facebook and through word of mouth, because they know specifically what they're looking for, and they go looking specifically for professional certified coach.
Okay. But so what is it? What are their needs though that are bringing them to you? Is it that they're wanting coaching specific to their business, or are you getting a lot more of these requests of them wanting to learn how to use coaching as a leadership style specifically?
Yeah, it's both. So in my approach, what I do I go into organizations that are looking for leadership development programs, because they're interested in building up the capacity among their managers to be great leaders. And then from there, and the traditional leadership development program, includes, conflict resolution and time management and stress management and change management and workload and delegation and, priorities. And my work includes that, but I work with it in such a way that when people are actually practicing this leadership theory, I teach them how to use the coaching approach to do that. So people will come to me and they'll say, I want my team to be more effective. I want people, some people say, I'm tired of feeling like a referee. I have this revolving door of conflict, unresolved conflict that I'm always being faced and confronted with. Yeah. And so they'll come to me for coaching on how do I stop that? How do I find a more effective way of, helping my colleagues perform in a harmonious way where they can really put their time and attention and their energy into their jobs, and not into office politics, and not into conflict, and not into, coping with micromanaging leaders. And, so it's that essence, people feel like we can do better here. I know we can do better here. We're so talented and we've got such great potential, but we're looking for that secret ingredient to help elevate us. And that's what people will come to a coach for.
Okay. So just before we go on, I just want to share a few messages here. So David, good to meet you. Suggest you guys might be interested in connecting. It's lovely to see people in the chat, getting to know one another. And like I said, if anyone has questions for Corry, please feel free to share. So Corry, tell me a little bit how you go about working with a leader to help them develop their ability to coach. What kind of skills are you teaching them?
So when a leader comes to me wanting to become a coach, what we're doing first and foremost is we're teaching them a communication style. That's what it boils down to. And it comes into play with emotional intelligence, and it comes into play with the traditional management skills as well. So we're teaching how to listen. So as you know very well, Lindsay, communication, effective communication, the crux of it is listening skills. So what are those layers of listening? So we can listen to a person, and, I was just coaching someone yesterday, and he said, I notice when someone's talking to me, they come to me for problem solving. I don't even really listen to the whole thing that they're saying. Before they even finish their sentence, I'm already thinking about what I'm going to say. So in coaching, we learn how to slow it down and really listen completely and entirely to a person. We teach them how to listen in such a way that we hear the solution being explained to us in the question. And that might sound sort of almost magical, and it can feel magical when you really say, you say back to a client, you've told me your solution. I heard you tell me your solution. I'll say, well, what did I say? I don't know what I said that made you think that. And so let's track back, let's review what you just said. And then they go, oh my gosh, you're right. I did say it. So there's that old adage, the answer's in the question. So coaches know how to hear that. And so that's what I teach them how to do. So there's the layer of listening where you're listening just sort of like for facts and feedback. Then there's the layer of listening where you start to take in everything that's going on around you, the context of the conversation. And then there's a deeper level, there's that intuitive level where you're really able to read the energy of the person. And that's, where trust comes in.
Yeah.
It's an important part of communication. And that's an important part. It's establishing trust and safety is actually a coaching competency. And when you're learning how to coach, you learn sort of the methodology behind this and the context behind that, and how it shows up in your behavior.
That makes a lot of sense to me. And like you said earlier, I think a lot of that links to that whole belief or philosophy at the core of it, that the client has the competencies and the answers within themselves, and that the role is not to tell them what to do and how to fix their lives, which is so commonly seen, but rather to help guide them to those answers. And that, I find, is a skill or a philosophy that isn't pervasive, I guess, is maybe the way I might
Sure. And that's so interesting you're touching on that, because I think we come from a culture where our worth is what we know, and our worth is the problems that we can solve, and our worth is
what we know, what we do.
Pardon me?
What we know and what we do.
Yeah, exactly. So we always want to be demonstrating that. We want to be helpful and add value by saying, this is what I know, this is what I think you should do. And people who are struggling with their leadership will often find, I'm giving such great advice and they're not taking it. I told them what to do and they didn't do it, and then I tried coaching them, and I'll say, tell me what your coaching questions are. And they'll say, well, I said things like, open-ended questions, like, have you tried doing it like this?
Sorry, I'm laughing so hard.
It's resonating, right? Because people think that that's a really good coach. Why don't you try doing like that? Yeah. Those are not coaching questions. That's thinly veiled advice. Yeah. And the problem with that is, although what you're telling them might be the perfect solution, it didn't come from them. Yeah. So they're going to resist it. Mm-hmm. And then they're going to come back and they're going to say, well, I thought it was more like a suggestion, because it wasn't clear. It was sort of vague, and it was in some cases, it can be even manipulative.
Yes.
And then it causes frustration and it causes conflict.
Yeah. And I think sometimes manipulative without even the person using it necessarily intentionally trying to manipulate. It's just a pattern that has established because it gets things done and it gets things moving in the direction they want them.
Oh, yeah. They think they're being helpful, and they think they're doing their jobs, and they think this is how they're going to get results. But it just keeps on falling short, and they don't know why. Yeah.
And to be clear, and I was going to say, I know you agree with this, but I guess I can't know that. I'm going to guess you agree with this. I think there, it's not the fault of any one leader or one organization. This is a huge cultural piece in North America, at least generally, where, like you said, there's so much weight put into what you do and what you accomplish and the outcomes, and going right back to school, right? So when I look at having made this shift in my own life professionally, I'm now really interested in watching, as my children go through the school system, how it encourages that type of behavior, right? If you have the solution really fast, you get extra tokens. And so it's a shift in that whole underlying, kind of the way we've been trained in society, for lack of a better way of saying it. And one thing I was wanting to share was that when you were talking about how the focus is so much on doing, so I find when I feel insecure in a situation, I slip very easily back into solving the problem, having the quick answers, because like you said, that's what has been rewarded and reinforced in our society. So how do you work with leaders to shift those patterns? Because that's big behavioral change.
Yeah, it's a huge behavioral change, and it requires a reflex, right? To just pause before you jump in and start trying to give that advice. And I think what starts to happen, and in leadership development programs that include learning how to coach, we practice, so we practice in a safe space, and we learn the competency, and then we practice the competency and learn it and then practice it. And I'm there and I'm supervising these coaching conversations that are done between peers. And I will show what they're doing really well and how they're nailing the competency. And then I'll show them where they derailed the conversation. And when I work with student coaches all the time, and they'll often send me their recordings, because that's part of coach training, is that you record your coaching sessions and you send them to your mentor coach, which is a capacity that I serve in. And they'll say, Corry, my call derailed. I don't know what happened. And it was just an exhausting call. And then I listen to it, and I can usually tell exactly where it switched from being a coaching conversation where the coach decided for some reason that the best way they could add value was to give advice or jump in assuming that they know what the problem is. But when you realize that when you can use the coaching conversation really well, the conversation becomes really, really easy for both of you. And you're not trying so hard to solve the problem and to give the perfect answer and to show that you're worthy of your job as a manager or as a leader. It becomes easy and fluid, and both people in the conversation leave so happy, because the person on the receiving end of the coaching conversation, you've made them feel like a genius because you showed them where their genius is.
Yeah.
And so they will be ignited, and they will be inspired and motivated to go and put their knowledge and their creativity to work. And you'll see that it's so much more powerful. And then you can put your energy back into your job. You're not depleted because you've just spent, 30 minutes trying to prove how you're a genius on this topic.
Yeah. And what you say there about tapping into, like earlier you said about tapping into that energy. And I guess you didn't quite say this, but what I heard was all that nonverbal communication in the room that gives you signals of, you can feel that resistance. I can. And I'm going to guess you can, that you can start to feel where when a conversation slips off into giving unsolicited and undesired advice, the whole tone of the conversation shifts, people shut down. And so I'm guessing that's also part of what you do there, that you're helping people tap into that awareness.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Because sometimes it is appropriate to share a little bit of the knowledge or experience that you have as the coach, but you don't want to take it so far as to now start telling people what to do with it. So, there's in the coaching competencies, you learn, you get a reflex to just stop talking, and just to pause and to check in with the person and say, let me just see, how is this landing for you? What are you able, now that we've, explored a few ideas, what's starting to emerge as a solution that you want to start building up? So there's these mechanisms of pausing and checking in with the person, and pausing and checking in with the person. When you see like eyes glaze over and people start nodding and they start saying, yeah, okay. Yeah, I got it. Okay. Those are signs that your person you're trying to coach is shutting down.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So David here is saying, I should say David James, we have two Davids here. Stephen Covey said, first seek to understand, but how many of us are good at really listening to others? Some bosses don't actually lead, they give orders.
Yeah.
Do you have anything you want to share about that?
Yeah, so I love that book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It was one of the first professional development books that I ever read, and I think it was a catalyst in my own quest to be a better leader, and then what eventually led me to becoming a coach. So I highly recommend the book, and I think that the place where people fall short is, you can read so many books and you can take so many courses, and the reason why people still are not able to apply that skill, seek first to understand and then be understood, is because they don't have the context for practicing. To really build up those muscles and those reflexes and that ability to pause. What does that mean, really, to fully understand? Like, what am I actually doing when I'm seeking to fully understand? And then when do I know that it's time to be understood? And who needs to understand whom? Right? So the book is fantastic. And if you haven't read it, please go get it.
I haven't. I've read bazillions of books, and it's not one of the ones I've read. So I'll have to stick that on my mile-long list of books.
It's interesting. I picked up that book. What sold me on it was, at the time, Alanis Morissette had just published, she just recorded her album, Jagged Little Pill. And she accredits her success on the album to applying the principles in that book. So it's, but it's, reading a book is great. It's going to give you knowledge and information. But to answer David's question, it's the practice. It's finding the opportunity to practice what's resonating with you.
Yeah. And I guess also in my experience, it's being willing to deal with the uncomfortable feelings that come up when you try things that you're not very good at, right?
Yes.
Because, and when I say not very good at, I don't mean that particularly aimed at any one person, because I think we all have room to grow in this area, but it's particularly tricky in a work setting when people are used to you being a certain way to start to interact differently.
Yes.
And it feels uncomfortable, especially I think in a leadership. Well, maybe not, but in any case, that's hard.
You're hitting on something, so I created a resource, a follow-up resource for this evening. And it's about the 7 major pitfalls that happen from leadership development. And you're hitting the nail right on the head. And this is why so many leadership development initiatives fail, is because, and this is one of the pitfalls, is that people don't anticipate, the runway that they're going to need. So learning new skills and behaviors, it's more than knowledge. It's more than having tips and tricks and facts, information from a book. It's having the time to practice, the energy to practice, because it does take a lot of extra energy to practice a new skill set. It's having the courage to try again. It's having the strength of character to go, oh, I really blew it that time, and I'm going to be humble enough to go and try again. In an organizational context, you have to have the support of the culture. And I know you talk about culture a lot on your show, the support of those people who are sponsoring the leadership development initiatives, to say, you're allowed to make a mistake.
Yeah.
Go and try again. We've got your back. Instead of saying, oh, we spent a fortune on your coach training program and look at you can't coach, forget it,
Right. Yeah. I'd love to hear from everyone listening if you've experienced any of this, or what challenges you see in terms of being able to implement this kind of change. I know that I share, I've had similar experiences, I guess, as what you're saying here, Corry, and my website, actually somewhere on it says something to the effect of, I can't remember the wording, but basically the message is, this isn't a magic pill that will change things overnight. Because, and when I put that up, quite a while back, I really reflected on, I'm going to discourage some people, but the reality was, I don't want clients who think this is going to be, one session and it's all fixed and done, because the reality of behavioral change is, like you said, it takes time and practice and investment and commitment. And that's where clients are going to see the most benefit. I do want to share, though, so you had mentioned your resource, and so this is a link to anyone interested in, maybe I can let you describe it a bit more, but in the resource that Corry has put together for you.
Yeah, so it's the 7 hidden pitfalls of leadership development programs, and it really itemizes things like what we're talking about. Why it's so hard to change behaviors, and how to set yourself up for success, so that when you do want to embrace a new leadership style, when you do, coaching is, I just read an article yesterday, and it was something like leveraging the coaching revolution. And I thought, wow, what great language. Coaching is now a revolution. And it's because, awesome. More and more organizations, and, the International Coach Federation has this award that they give out to corporations every year. It's called the PRISM Award. And it's an award for companies who've established coaching culture. And some of the most famous, iconic companies on the planet are winning this award. Coca-Cola, IBM, BBC, the United Nations, and why are these huge organizations investing in coaching and coaching culture and coaching as a leadership style? It's because it works. It's because it increases engagement, it increases productivity, it reduces turnover, it reduces errors, it makes customers happier because employees are happier, so the resource explains a lot about what are those pitfalls, and then how do we go about overcoming them, so that, if it's a leadership development program of you yourself, and because it's your personal quest, or if it's an organizational wide thing, so what is the time required? And, traditionally leadership development programs, and there's some spectacular ones in Canada, they send a busload of their high-performing, high-potential leaders away for a week to some beautiful resort someplace, and they teach them, leadership skills. And these are great. They're going to get a lot of great content, but they fall short, and people are disappointed they don't get the ROI because it was too much, too soon, and they didn't have the time to practice. So what we're seeing now in leadership development, and I mean, it's an absolute must for anybody who wants to learn coaching as a leadership style. So we're looking at micro-learning sessions where the training component is short, maybe an hour and a half a week, every other week, but it goes on for several months, depending on how far you want to go down, into the mastery of the competency, because you have to learn a little bit, practice a little bit. You have to have your group learning with your cohort, and you also have to have your private coaching, so that the things in the group that maybe you didn't want to speak up about because you're not comfortable about it, you didn't agree, you didn't want to put your neck out, or you hadn't finished formulating your thought, you want to be able to go back into your private coaching session in a safe place and say, this didn't work for me. What happened? Yeah. Or this was fantastic, and I didn't want to brag, but I want to figure out what I did.
Yeah.
So that's, some elements of a great, going back to the question, around seeking first to understand, why do we not do that? It's because we don't know the mechanics of it. So learn a little bit, practice a little bit, get coaching on it, and then perpetuate that cycle. I have been learning and practicing my craft for, 15 years. And every day I think, wow, I have so much more to learn. But the more I practice it, the more I fall in love with it, the easier it makes my life, the more enriched my relationships are, and then spreading it out into organizations and people coming back to me and saying, Corry, I've been struggling with this for years, and now it's finally falling into place. And really special.
That piece you shared about that ongoing support, to me, is very important. And I've done a lot of work where I've built extensive training programs, and the piece that always bothered me with it was exactly what you're describing, was that people would come to me after and say, but what now? I tried this piece and it's not quite working. And the issue wasn't that the skills learned there, that was necessarily wrong. It was just learning all the nuances of, okay, that's the general idea, but how do I adapt it in this situation, in that situation? What do I do when, all those pieces take that ongoing support? And I think that when organizations can view this as an investment, like you've said, it does pay off when people are able to practice these skills with a coach, like you're saying here. I just want to go into the comments here for a second. So David is saying a culture that engenders psychological safety can certainly accelerate the development of leaders.
Yes, psychological safety is it's a somewhat, I'm finding it's popularized. I'm hearing the term psychological safety more and more and more, and establishing trust and safety is one of the 8 coaching competencies. So how do you set up your relationships with your peers and your colleagues and your direct reports so that they trust you and they feel safe? How do you do that? How do you learn that? And what's super interesting too, and I really want to make this point, it's a bit of a sidebar. But in this kind of a culture, or using coaching as a leadership style and being on the receiving end, being an employee of a manager who behaves this way, it takes the employee a degree of leadership competency as well. Mm-hmm. And I'll illustrate that point by sharing a story. I had an executive coaching call. It was an executive in England, and it was his job to set up a coaching culture and to establish in the culture a sense of psychological safety, like David is talking about. And what happened was somebody went to HR and complained that his manager disturbed his psychological safety because he received constructive feedback. So he didn't like the fact that he was corrected. So it's like, you can't abuse an organization's efforts to establish psychological safety. The person on the receiving end still needs to have resilience. They still need to have grit. They still need to take feedback, and I always say constructive feedback, but it has to happen. So then to turn around and complain that, I was corrected is not fair. And it's, a coaching culture is not going to work. Psychological safety is not going to work in environments where people are not willing to be on the receiving end of correction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And of course, it all depends on the nuance of how that's done. But absolutely, when it's done, in a way that is psychologically safe, I fully agree with you. So just to add here, so David's saying that the CSA developed a standard for psychological health and safety in 2014 that not many people seem to know about. And I just want to pop over here. So Nurdan is saying that building a new habit is not easy. It needs commitment and systems to support the habit building, reminders, buddy supports. This is going back to what we were talking about earlier. If anyone has any questions for Corry, please feel free to drop those in the chat. Corry, I'd like to ask you though, can you give me some examples? So a leader who is wanting to try to use more of a coaching style with their team, can you give me some concrete examples of how to do that, sentences they can try, questions they can ask, so that they can walk out of this with a few new tricks to try?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll just talk you quickly through, the coaching conversation model, which starts with establishing focus. So a person comes into your office and they have something on their mind they need to talk about. So before, sort of jumping on the first thing, take the time to really zero in on what is the topic. And, if any of my students are on the line, they're going to, oh, Corry, you, and the topic. That is key. What is this conversation about? So in the coaching competencies, we call this, establishing focus, establishing the agreement. What is it that the person wants to walk away with? What will make this a successful meeting for them? Mm-hmm. And this is where a lot of new coaches, where their coaching conversations fall apart, because they sort of, jump at the first thing that's put down in front of them. So you really want to take the time to get clear on what is the problem and what does success look like. My magic question is, what do you want instead? And this will often stop people in their tracks, because they'll say, well, I don't want this to happen and I don't want that to happen. And they'll give you all of these things that they don't want instead. And the coach really that's where they have to pause and reflect and say, and encourage them to phrase their statement in terms of the positive, meaning what do I want to have happen? Mm-hmm. And then we explore what will be better because of that. So that's number one, that is establishing the focus. The next part is exploring possibilities. So I didn't say goal setting. I didn't say action planning. I said explore the possibilities before we jump into goals. And this is where, new coaches often get into the trap of giving advice. We want the person that we're coaching to really unpack their ideas and think outside of the box. Give them, I love to take my pencil and say, pretend this is your magic wand. If you could create anything, what would it be? Then we go into action planning. Okay, how are you going to go about getting this done? The next step is removing barriers. So you don't want to, get into removing barriers too soon, because that will put you back into a perpetual cycle of negativity and what I don't want and what won't work. So we want to really get clear. What's the topic?
Can I just interject 2 seconds? So I think your mic might be hitting onto something. Is that possible?
I don't know, because I'm not wearing a mic. It's maybe.
Okay, there's just an ongoing. Okay, sorry. I just thought I would mention it because there was an ongoing bumping noise, and I just thought it might be distracting from.
I'm just looking around to see if I'm stepping on wires or anything.
Okay. Anyhow, continue. We'll see how that goes.
Okay, and I'll sort of
apologize for interrupting.
So after we establish the focus, we discover possibilities, we set goals and plan actions. Then we remove the barriers. So that's like, what would get in our way of succeeding. And then the last step is managing progress and accountability. And I want to pick up on Nurdan and her comment about, tracking habits, establishing habits and tracking them. And I here to you for sharing that with us, because establishing, a mechanism for managing progress and accountability is key. And this is where managers have a superpower, because we want to create the coaching conversation so that the onus for accountability and managing the progress is on the side of your team member. I don't want you to be the person who holds all the cards for the progress and accountability. So ask, and you negotiate. And this is a part of the coach approach to delegation as well. You negotiate. When are you going to come back and give me a report on how this is doing? What are you going to come back to me with? What do you want me to do if you don't present yourself in my office in this time and day? And then with habit trackers like the ones that Nurdan teaches us how to use, it's a day by day thing. If we're trying to build a new habit, if we're trying to build a new behavior, we track it, down to, as minute as you want it to be, and then keep it sort of recorded so that there's always something to keep the conversation open and we can go back. So that's, that sort of coaching conversation model that I just shared, it's, I think it maybe took me 2 or 3 minutes to go through the spectrum. Great. But a coaching conversation can take an hour, and, a coaching relationship, can be weeks, months, even years, depending on the client.
Mm-hmm. That piece you shared about the onus needing to be on the person being coached, I think is so key. And I've been on the receiving end a few times in my life, not necessarily always with a coach, but in that similar relationship where, I'm working with somebody where the accountability piece is shared to me as I will hold you accountable, and I immediately feel resistance to it. And it's because it sets us up as a parent-child relationship. And I do not need a parent in my life, and so that piece of, the accountability coming, for me, it takes it away from a place of intrinsic motivation, I should say. When I have to do something to get a check on a list for someone else, and I, obviously this leads back to, how I was raised and all that stuff, but I need to pursue goals because I want to, not because someone else is telling me I have to. Yeah. And so it immediately makes me less likely to do the things when that balance of, like you said, that information isn't drawn out from the person in terms of, what are you going to do to move this forward and how, and I'm way, way, way more likely to get on board when it's done that way. And I think that extends, the reason I share that is I know that's not just me, from my own professional experience too. And then what happens, I see a lot, is that when people are then not doing the pieces they said they'd be accountable to, but they didn't actually, that wasn't drawn out from them, then they don't do it. And then they're seen as unmotivated and not committed and all those kinds of words, when in reality, the process through which the accountability was decided upon was actually more the challenge than the person not being motivated. So I think that's a really key piece. I just want to pop on here. So Alain is here, I believe, from Paris. So Thank you for joining us in the middle of the night. If I'm not mistaken, you're from Paris, so I know it's quite late over there. So Corry, getting back to that piece we just did, can you share a few examples then of the difference between, you did this a bit earlier, but just to highlight it a bit more, the difference between a coaching question and less helpful questions, I guess, for lack of a better way of saying it?
Yeah, so coaching questions, they're open-ended questions, right? So they're questions, that means the question forces a complete answer. And so contrast, a closed-ended question is, did you do this? Did you do that? Will you deliver this to me on Tuesday? Those will get you a yes or a no. And so basically when you ask those questions, the person is just going to answer you with the answer that you want to hear, right? They just want out of your office or out of this conversation as soon as possible. A coaching question is a powerful question that evokes awareness and it ignites, and you were talking about being motivated, and, that is really the magic of what a coach can do is they are able, and it goes back again to establishing, trust and safety in a relationship. Your coach, your manager should know what motivates you and the kind of language that inspires you. And when, as a manager, then you should be able to take the purpose of the task or the purpose of the goal and connect it to what motivates you. So why is your task important to you as a human being? How are you adding value and meaning? How does this connect to your purpose in life and why you work here and why you came into this career? So the coach has to be able to make that connection and bring that awareness to the person they're coaching. And, you were saying, when people start using words with me, like, how are you going to hold yourself accountable? The coach has to know, your coach has to know that those words bug you. And so it's part of the listening skills, the active listening. A coach is able to hear you on that intuitive level and hear the words that you use and the kind of the language that you use to craft your essence. And then the coach's job is to say, okay, well, I get it. Lindsay doesn't like words like that. It's too parent-like, so you find other words through listening, so, how are you going to, I don't know, how are you going to make this happen? What's your plan? What's it going to look like when you're successful? And how is this contribution going to be meaningful towards the organization? That is what sparks the intrinsic motivation. And there is no one size fits all. There's no, stock list. You can go on Amazon and I'm sure you can buy a book of coaching, the 200 best coaching questions in the world or whatever. I'm not a huge believer in those kinds of books because the coach has to adapt her language to yours and use that in a way that aligns the two of you intuitively. And that's how you're both elevated.
I agree with you. It's really honing that intuitive sense. And I see where those tools can sometimes come in handy in that awkward, I'm learning new skills phase, but it can't replace the intuitive connection because in my experience, it then feels very rote and people intuitively pick up on that. And it's, obviously not quite as effective. So we're hitting the end of our time here. So I just wanted to go back and yet again share the gift that you've prepared. So the 7 Hidden Pitfalls, it's a free resource that you can download here on Corry's website. And this recording will live on my YouTube channel, Collaborative Solutions, once it posts about tomorrow, I think. So if you haven't been able to jot that down, you can pop over to YouTube and get this link there. Corry, where's the best place for people to reach out to you?
So thanks for asking. So I'm here on LinkedIn, Corry Robertson. My Facebook page is called Corry Robertson, Alive from 9 to 5. And my website is corryrobertson.com. If you're interested in going more deeply into this topic, go to the coach training resources that I have. It's one of the tabs on top. The Coaching Academy for Leaders is just opened for enrollment. So if anybody out there is curious about what's involved in learning how to use coaching as a leadership style, just book a call with me. You've got my scheduler right there on my website on the resources section. Just book a virtual coffee with me and we can talk if this is right for you and what would be involved in the journey.
Perfect. So everyone can check that out on Corry's website here, corryrobertson.com. So thanks everyone for listening and watching. As usual, we'll be back next week, same time, Wednesday, 6 p.m. with Joanne Marlowe, who will be talking to us about rebuilding your business with the best people, because a lot of businesses have been struggling with having to let a lot of people go and are kind of in that process of reflecting on when the time comes to rebuilding their team. How are they going to do that? So Joanne will be joining us next week to speak with us about that. You can keep an eye out and follow the hashtag Live with Lindsay to get all notifications of each of our weekly guests. And of course, if you're looking for your organization for support in helping your leaders refine their leadership communication skills to elevate team performance, you can find my website at lindsaylapaquette.com. So thank you for watching, everyone, and we'll see you back next week.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Corry.
Thank you for being here, everybody. I hope you enjoyed our time together tonight. And thanks again, Lindsay. It's such an honor to be a guest on your program.
Thanks so much. It's been great getting to learn from you. Bye, everyone.